Moving on with Chapter 29 in Radiography in the Digital Age. Let's talk about how we form a digital image from an analog signal. Diagnostic imaging converts various forms of electromagnetic energy into visual representations of human anatomy. X-rays for our purposes, radio waves for MRI, and sound waves in sonography all begin with an analog signal that must be converted into a digital form in order for us to see the images on our monitors. This occurs in three main steps: scanning, sampling, and quantization. Once the image is digitized, each pixel contains a number that represents the brightness level, or gray level. This number represents the tissue characteristics in X-ray and CT. In MRI, the analog signal is different. The patient gets put into a high magnetic field and bombarded by radio waves, which excites hydrogen atoms in the body. The analog signal being detected represents proton density and relaxation times of those molecules. Don't worry, you won't have to remember this for the registry. We're going to be focusing on X-ray content. In all cases, these are just forms of electromagnetic radiation being measured. Pixel size can be calculated by dividing the field of view by the matrix size. The larger the matrix size, the smaller the pixel size, and the better resolution, as long as the field of view remains the same. Again, a voxel is just the 3D representation including thickness. These images show the advancement in CT imaging. In 1975, CT was only capable of a 128 by 128 matrix. Today, CT can use a 512 by 512 or 1024 by 1024 matrix. When we compare analog images to digital images, there are some important steps in image formation and viewing we need to consider. Analog images have a conversion of energy from X-ray to visible light, which is a continuous signal. Digital images are composed of predetermined numbers. A copy machine has the same conversion where it can scan a piece of paper, but the variation in light detection through that paper creates a predetermined set of numbers that shows up on the digital image after quantization. Again, here are the three steps we've outlined, but note that within the quantization, the analog to digital converter rounds the pixel values to the nearest number as the signal comes in. Step 1 is scanning. Scanning divides the image into an array or matrix of pixels. For digital radiography, collimation of the X-ray beam determines the number of pixels in the image. Scanning is the preliminary step. Each cell becomes a pixel in the final image. Each pixel is then assigned a designator for its location. Scanning is the pre-copy sweep that a copy machine makes before it actually prints a copy. It scans the document at the first step. In CR, the reader scans the latent image first. In DR, collimation helps control which detector elements, or dexels, are being scanned and sampled. Step 2 is sampling. In this step, the intensity of radiation is measured by a detector. In DR, the sampling aperture is square, and the samplings are adjacent. In CR, the sampling aperture is round, and the samplings overlap. Sampling is the process of measuring each pixel value for grayscale. In CR, the measurement device is the image plate. The sampling instrument is round, and the laser that reads the IP is also round. When you look at DR, the measurement device is the detector array. That sampling instrument is square. When you compare it to MRI, for example, the measurement device is a radio antenna. Moving on to step 3, quantization. In this final step, a numerical value is assigned to each pixel as a gray level and is the final step in digitizing the image. There is value assigned to each individual pixel. Each pixel is a discrete, pre-designated gray level, In other words, a number in the computer that allows it to understand and manipulate the image. This is a binary code. Dynamic range is the range of gray levels, or the number of shades of gray possible that the computer can pick from. The computer takes the numbers in analog form and rounds them up or down to the nearest digital number so the computer can understand it. This is the function of the analog to digital converter. This image shows you what's happening. It's a very similar process when recording music. Sound waves are created by the saxophone here in analog form. The ADC is sampling sound waves and assigns varying notes or volumes and a numerical value before it goes into the computer. In order to be projected onto the monitor, digitization is required, but in order for you to hear the sound on the speakers later, it actually undergoes another step which turns the digital signal into audio waves, in analog form again, for you to hear with your ears. Here's Kim's analogy for digitizing an image, which is much like buying a car. Step 1 is the I'm just looking phase. It's not necessarily your car yet, you're just taking a peek. Step 2 is test driving the car, or sampling the car. You measure which car fits you better. And step 3 is I've bought the car, it's mine now, which relates to quantization. Now I'm committed and I get to take it home. In the top image on the right, we have the analog signal. And if you can see that small red square within that image, that's what we're looking at in the middle image magnified. The middle image just shows that magnified sample where there's been no number assigned, but it's measuring grayscales. And the bottom image, quantization has occurred. Each grayscale has been assigned a number representing brightness. Bit depth and dynamic range go hand in hand. Bit depth, again, is the number of grays that can be stored by the computer. The human range we can read is 5-bit, or 2 to the 5th power, which is 32 bits. Digital images can be 10-bit, meaning 1024 gray levels that can be stored and assigned to a pixel by the computer. It's not as important as the dynamic range. Dynamic range is what's valuable, and it's often higher than the bit depth. It's the number of gray shades each pixel can represent. When you have a wide dynamic range, you have more shades of gray available for image display with your radiograph. Note the tissue differences you're seeing in the neck, all the way to the outer skin. You can see variation in bone density in the skull and mandible. You can see the dens, the mastoid air cells, and even the bottoms of the maxillary sinuses in dynamic visualization mode here. So think about how the increase of dynamic range might influence the radiologist's ability to read and diagnose based off your x-rays. This slide illustrates the difference between bit depth and dynamic range. Think of bit depth like the number of stairs, while dynamic range represents the entire range of steps in the full length of stairs. A digital radiograph likely won't display the entire range of steps, but only a portion of them. When you window to a specific range, you're adjusting the brightness to be able to visualize the anatomy you need to see.